or no question, were you with President Trump during any of those conversations he had with people with oil interests in Venezuela about the possibility of deposing Maduro?
That's not a simple yes or no question, but I can answer it quickly, and that is the president always elicits opinions from all sorts of people, including, for example, Chevron has an active license in Venezuela. They operate in Venezuela. They've been doing so even when the sanctions were in place. So of course you would ask Chevron, what is your opinion of Delcy Rodriguez? What are your opinion of their economy and of their prospect? But the notion that somehow the president authorized this challenge at the urging of oil executives is absurd. That never happened.
Mr. Secretary, I'm asking whether you were with the president.
That never happened. I couldn't be with him because it never happened. The oil executives were not involved whatsoever in any of the planning on this matter.
This may look like a heated exchange over foreign policy decisions, but it's actually a test of whether personal financial interests can coexist with national power. What's really being tested here is the boundary between public authority and private gain, and whether U.S. foreign policy is insulated from personal business incentives. This raises broader questions about how decisions are justified, who gets consulted, and what accountability looks like when global strategy intersects with money and influence. In this video, we'll break down how these lines are defended, where they blur, and why that matters far beyond any single administration.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I want to discuss corruption in the White House and its intersection with our foreign policy. The president and his family have used the office of the presidency to pocket $1.4 billion plus since he was sworn in. New York Times analysis entitled Trump's Plundering of America indicates that some of that is a result of the president selling corruption here at home, but much of it relates to the president selling out U.S. interests overseas to make a killing for his family, including giving away sensitive U.S. semiconductor and AI technologies to the UAE, while the UAE pumped $2 billion into one of the Trump family ventures. And then there are all the other Trump deals that are intertwined with tariff or foreign policy matters. Golf courses in Saudi Arabia and Vietnam, Trump hotels and office buildings in other countries. And of course, there's the $400 million jet from Qatar. The list goes on and on. By any measure, this is the most corrupt administration in American history. We also see the president wielding U.S. power overseas in a way that advances the interests of his billionaire buddies at the expense of American interests. It was Ron Lauder, who has business ventures in Greenland, who reportedly first put the idea of grabbing Greenland into President Trump's mind. And in the case of Venezuela, President Trump has said he talked to oil executives about toppling Maduro and going into Venezuela before anyone in Congress knew. We know that in President Trump's mind, deposing Maduro was not about stopping the flow of fentanyl or drugs in the United States. He cut the budget for DEA. He pardoned the former Honduran president convicted of drug running. And the new president, Delcy Rodriguez, has herself been long suspected by DEA of being involved in drug smuggling. She's also a longtime hardened communist leader, so this operation certainly was not about bringing more freedom and democracy to Venezuela. In fact, the president told us what it was all about at his big press conference after seizing Maduro. The president said it was about oil, oil, oil. He used the word oil 19 times, never mentioned democracy or freedom or human rights. And so the pattern of corruption is clear. Now, President Trump has said publicly that he had communications with folks from the oil industry about going into Venezuela before anyone here in Congress was notified. Mr. Secretary, simple yes or no question. Were you with President Trump during any of those conversations he had with people with oil interests in Venezuela about the possibility of deposing Maduro?
That's not a simple yes or no question, but I can answer it quickly, and that is the president always elicits opinions from all sorts of people, including, for example, Chevron has an active license in Venezuela. They operate in Venezuela. They've been doing so even when the sanctions were in place. So of course you would ask Chevron, what is your opinion of Delcy Rodriguez? What are your opinion of their economy and of their prospect? But the notion that somehow the president authorized this challenge at the urging of oil executives is absurd. That never happened.
Mr. Secretary, I'm asking whether you were with the president.
That never happened. I couldn't be with him because it never happened. The oil executives were not involved whatsoever in any of the planning on this matter. None.
Did the president, as he said publicly, inform them about the U.S. operations?
I think all of those executives learned about this operation the same time everybody else did.
Well, President Trump has said the opposite in public.
No.
Yes, he has. I mean, he said it. I think it was aboard Air Force One on an airplane. It's on public record. You can take a look. Look, Paul Singer, who you know, gave $8 million toward Trump's 2024 campaign. Conveniently, through his hedge fund, he's acquired Citgo out of bankruptcy, which is suddenly very, very valuable. Did you or President Trump have any communications with Paul Singer about Venezuelan oil in the months leading up to the military action in Venezuela?
I can tell you I did not, and I would be very surprised what the president did in that regard. And in fact, that Singer position that you've outlined, which is not just him but other creditors, was actually was blocked. We don't want to see. It's one of the reasons why we had to do this account in a third country in the interim, is because we don't want it to be something that's picked apart by creditors.
I appreciate that, and we'll monitor it carefully. There's also Vitol. They've been given a license for Venezuelan oil worth about $250 million. Vitol's senior partner, John Addison, gave $6 million to the Trump-aligned PACs in the last cycle. And the list goes on, Mr. Secretary. And I have to say that when you have the President of the United States himself, after taking Maduro, get up and say this was about oil, 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 it does make all of us ask the question whether he put men and women in the U.S. military at risk simply so he could grab that oil.
Well, that oil,
yeah,
and I don't know if you were here. I think you were here the whole hearing. I don't think you had left. Number one, the only reason why we use Trafi and Vitol is simply because in the short term, we had to move 50 million barrels of oil that were stuck. And Venezuela needed to turn that into cash so that they wouldn't have systemic collapse. And the fastest way to do it in the short term is for the traders to do it, because that's in the business that they're in. That is not the permanent structure. The permanent structure we want to see is a normal oil industry where it's sold directly. You know, companies have licenses down there, they have an arrangement to pay royalties, and they move the oil directly to their refineries or sell it in the global market, not through middlemen. Yeah. The only reason why they were used in this instance is because we had an acute short-term problem, which is how do we provide funding from their own revenue, not ours, to keep their government afloat. So in essence, we allowed Venezuela to use their own oil to generate revenue to pay teachers and firefighters and police officers and keep the function of government operating so we didn't have systemic collapse. But that system with those traders, that is not the long-term plan here at all.
My only point, Mr. Secretary, is those folks who gave a lot of money to the Trump campaign have done very well as a result of what's happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Daines.
The moment hangs in the air as Senator Chris Van Hollen presses forward, his voice steady but unmistakably sharp, drawing a straight line between power, money, and American foreign policy. In this exchange, he does not argue hypotheticals. He cites figures, names, transactions, and public statements. He points to a pattern he believes is hiding in plain sight. And as the Secretary responds, carefully choosing words, deflecting absolutes, and rejecting the premise outright, the contrast becomes the story itself. What we are witnessing here is not just a dispute over facts. It is a deeper confrontation over the meaning of public service. Van Hollen frames his case around a single, unsettling question. When the United States acts abroad, whose interests are truly being served? He describes a presidency where personal business, family ventures, and international decisions appear, in his telling, tightly interwoven. He cites public reporting, major financial sums, and high-profile deals overseas, arguing that global power has become inseparable from private gain. In his view, this is not coincidence. It is a system. The Secretary's response is equally revealing, not only in what he denies, but in how he denies it. He rejects the idea that private industry dictated policy. He emphasizes process, consultation, and necessity. He explains that conversations with companies are routine, that logistics sometimes demand temporary measures, and that short-term decisions do not define long-term strategy. His defense rests on the claim that outcomes, not motives, should define judgment, that the machinery of government still operates within lines of responsibility, even amid extraordinary circumstances. But the tension remains unresolved, because the issue here is not a single meeting or a single conversation. It is the perception of alignment between political power and financial reward. Van Hollen returns again and again to timing, to donations, to the sudden rise in value of certain assets after decisive government action. He does not accuse in vague terms. He asks direct questions. Were you there? Did this happen? Did these conversations take place before Congress was informed? And when the answers are categorical denials, he counters with the president's own public remarks, delivered openly, on the record for the world to hear. This is where the exchange transcends partisan theater and enters a more serious realm. Trust. A democracy does not rely solely on legality. It relies on confidence that decisions are made for the public good. When that confidence erodes, even lawful actions begin to feel suspect. When leaders speak casually about motivations that appear transactional, it weakens the moral authority of the office itself. Van Hollen's argument is not simply that policy choices were flawed, but that the explanation offered by the president himself stripped those choices of higher principle. The Secretary insists that the goal was stability, that temporary measures were designed to prevent collapse, that the long-term vision remains orderly and institutional. He paints a picture of responsible management under pressure. And yet, even in this defense, the central discomfort remains, because the senator's final observation lingers like an unresolved chord. Those who financially supported the president appear to have benefited handsomely from the outcome. Whether intended or not, whether planned or incidental, the appearance alone carries weight. This moment exposes something fundamental about modern governance. Power today operates at the intersection of politics, capital, and global influence. When those lines blur, accountability becomes harder to define. Oversight becomes more contentious. And hearings like this one become the only arena where unanswered questions can be forced into the open, even if the answers never fully satisfy. What makes this exchange so consequential is not that one side definitively wins. It is that the public is invited to witness the process itself, to hear the accusations stated plainly, to hear the denials stated firmly, and to judge for themselves whether the explanations align with the values they expect from those entrusted with immense authority. In the end, Van Hollen closes not with a dramatic flourish, but with a quiet, damning observation. Money was given, decisions were made, profits followed. And regardless of intent, the result challenges the idea that power was exercised at arm's length from personal interest. That is the question now left with the audience. Not just what happened, but what kind of system allows doubt to flourish at this scale. Because history rarely turns on a single answer in a hearing room, it turns on patterns, on precedents, on whether leaders choose transparency over convenience and restraint over opportunity. Moments like this define how institutions are remembered and whether public faith can be restored once it is shaken. This is why oversight matters. This is why questions must be asked, even when the answers are uncomfortable. And this is why these exchanges deserve to be seen, heard, and understood in full. If you believe accountability should never be optional, if you believe power should always answer to the people, support our work to expose the truth. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.